I think we have a quorum, so Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy. Here. Alderwoman Flowers. Here. Alderman J. Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Kotar. Alderman Ogilvy.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg.
Here.
Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
8 present. You have a quorum.
All right. It looks like we have 4 bills before us. All of them are for people in our committee, so I don't think we can just go straight in numeric order. How about? Alderman from the 24th, you want to take up Board Bill number 4?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board Bill 4 is a rezoning bill for a property near Manchester Avenue on Mitchell Avenue. This property is currently vacant, has been vacant for over a decade. I don't know the exact time frame. It currently has dual zoning, B and J. The Manchester corridor has a lot of J zoning, which is obviously very permissive zoning, and we have a lot of areas where we have J directly adjacent to A single-family zoning, and there are a variety of quality of life things that happen when you've got those 2 zoning districts adjacent to each other. So when we have a chance, it's nice to remove the J zoning to be a little more restrictive in the types of uses that are available. So here we get to clean up the dual zoning. We rezone to G, local commercial district. And then the proximate reason to do this, the chance to do it, is because there is a self-storage facility currently on Manchester Avenue called Life Storage, which will be which has the property under contract and will be expanding their footprint into the southern half of this parcel. They'll be constructing a 2-story building with internal access to the storage lockers, and that will have to go through a conditional use process in the future, but that's what we've got before us.
Are there any questions of the Alderman from the 24th? Alderman from the 18th, do you?
No questions, thank you.
Oh, he is here.
I did make it.
Okay. I had the Alderman from the 18th that emailed me that he might not make it today, so glad to see him present. Alderwoman from the 2nd Ward.
No questions.
Alderman from the 22nd.
Sure, good morning.
Good morning, Alderman Boyd.
So what quality of life issues are you concerned about?
Well, J allows for all kinds of uses, junkyards, scrap yards, tire storage, all kinds of stuff. And while the property is currently vacant, none of those things are happening here. It could conceivably be used if it were re-subdivided for one of those uses. So when we have a chance to, we have a high concentration of used car sales, those types of activities along Manchester Avenue. I think and sometimes they have negative quality of life impacts for adjacent property owners. So if we can slowly head in a different direction in the Manchester corridor, I think that's a good thing.
So you wouldn't recommend anybody get involved in used car sales?
We don't all need cars. Many of us need cars. However, sometimes you can have too much of a good thing in one place.
I only know of one used car right at Manchester and Causland.
Oh, come on. I'll show you a whole bunch of them on Manchester. Yeah.
Oh, that's where you do. You're right, because if you can go, was it east or west? So that's the place to do used cars, Manchester. Then.
It very much is. Yes. But it's not.
Can we have too many hamburger?
The point is not that I just don't want used car sales. The point is that there's this wide variety of things, and the zoning is appropriate for 1947 when there was a steel mill there and there were all these industrial uses there. It makes perfect sense when the zoning was created. But in terms of, you know, sustaining decent residential property values, it's more problematic now to have single-family homes next to, you know, a scrapyard.
Out of curiosity, so as a J, someone could theoretically apply for occupancy for a junkyard today
I believe that's the case.
without a conditional use or anything like
Yeah.
that?
I don't believe that's correct. I think K unrestricted is required for outdoor storage.
Okay.
And then I think that might be with a conditional use on top of that, but.
Okay.
Oh, Mary's here. Mary, do you want to answer that? Junkyard,
So a junkyard would, excuse me, so a junkyard would be allowed in the J or the K district unless it was an area like in Alderwoman Flowers where she has an overlay district in SUD that doesn't allow for that.
does it
It's
require
very-
conditional use, though?
No, there's,
So you can do a junkyard with a, okay, my
I mean, you can do a
apologies.
number of
I stand
other
correct.
things like foul animal reduction, some very dated terminology in the zoning code.
Slaughterhouse could be there?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. I stand corrected, I'm sorry.
I actually sit on the planning commission, so I know what you're doing. I just wanted to have an educational opportunity for the rest of the members. Thank you, Scott. Alderman Ogilvy.
Alderwoman Davis.
No question.
Alderman Kotar.
No questions.
Is Alderwoman Boyd with us today? She is not. Alderman Bosley has joined us.
No questions.
Alderman Oldenburg.
No questions.
Hearing no other questions, the chair will recognize someone for a pass recommendation.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Flowers?
Aye.
Alderman Jeffrey Boyd?
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis?
Aye.
Alderman Kotar?
Aye.
Alderman Ogilvy?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd? Alderman Bosley?
Pass.
Alderman Oldenburg?
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
7 aye votes do pass.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Alderman. Let's see, the next board bill is the Alderman from the 7th. Have you done your research, Alderman? Did we do proper notification? Okay, we have a rules requirement for notification for committee substitutes, and the Alderman was a little concerned that we didn't comply with that, but I will acquiesce to his law degree and his practice as an attorney to interpret that rule, and he advises me now that, on the record, that we're okay with that.
I believe so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Board Bill 5 is a pretty simple bill, a quick amendment to the zoning code to permit garages or carports to take up more than 30% of your property. Right now, any garage that takes up more than 30% of a property requires an area variance, which requires a Board of Adjustment hearing. You got to pay a $200 filing fee. You've got to wait 6 to 8 weeks, delay your project, simply to build what would be a standard size garage. In many city lots, a standard size 22 by 22 two-car garage will take more than 30% of the lot, and that requires a delay in a hearing. There's approximately 18 to 20 of these a year. We can cut down on the number of Board of Adjustment hearings and also cut down on unnecessary delay in people constructing garages. So that's what this code seeks, this amendment to the code seeks to do. I do have a committee substitute. The committee substitute was placed in your mailboxes prior to 9 a.m. yesterday. I apologize for not also emailing it out. There was a couple of requests, but given the sort of staffing issues and everything else, I guess it didn't get emailed. But it was emailed. Oh, okay. So I didn't even see the email. That's good. So it was emailed out. Perfect. Thank you, Donna. So I would ask or move that we adopt the committee substitute to Board Bill 5.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we put before us the committee substitute for Board Bill 5. Madam, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Previous roll. Did someone vote no?
No, this is just to put the committee substitute before us.
Brandon passed the last
I just
time.
asked
don't
for
know if he
previous
wants to
roll.
vote.
Oh. Alderman Bosley, you had voted present because you had not heard the previous testimony for the previous board bill. Did you want to register an aye vote? All we're doing at this point is putting the committee substitute before us, which would be a procedural requirement. So,
Yes.
okay, so
So we'll call the
Madam
roll.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Kotar. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
8 aye votes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll be brief, but just by way of example, I'm passing out a sample of a parking, I guess, a carport, not a full garage, that was provided by Mary Hart Burton. You'll see this garage is, I believe, like 21 by 20 feet, and they built it purposefully smaller than the standard garage simply to avoid the Board of Adjustment hearing. So with this change, again, we can cut down on these hearings. And what the committee substitute seeks to do is to bring the penalty provision of this section in line with state law. And at a later date, this committee is going to probably need to take up the full zoning code. There's many provisions of the zoning code, the penalty provisions that are no longer in compliance with changes to state law regarding ordinance violations. This penalty provision on page 8 of 9 would simply refer you to chapter 1.1.2 of the revised code of the city, which is now the correct penalty provision. We fixed that for the overall city code last session. So that is just the simple cleanup of the committee sub. I think, in short, that this is a fairly sensible bill that will cut down on red tape and hearings and allow people to build garages, which is great for their property values and also actually helps with crime reduction, because the less cars we've got parked on the street, the less cars we've got getting broken into. So I would ask for your favorable consideration of Board Bill 5.
Alderman, out of curiosity, what exactly is the penalty provision for something like this?
Under the new section of the code, I don't know offhand what the maximum is. It's either $250 or $500. I don't remember.
But if we're referring to the wrong portion of the code,
We are not. This refers to the correct version of the code, 8 of 9. You'll see the old.
It's been lined out.
Yeah, the old provisions have been lined out.
right, but what I'm saying is if we have a whole bunch of if the old provision is all throughout the code,
Yes.
and we're trying to apply penalties to people, then wouldn't all those penalties?
That currently, yes, and I know my understanding, talking to Rebecca Wright from the City Councilor's office, is they are drafting currently a board bill to address all the other penalty issues within the zoning code. This one was already drafted and done, so we said, let's just move forward with it. But Chairman, I think that will be a discussion down the road, bringing all
But
those.
right now, if somebody could conceivably, who we're trying to fine, could just argue, well, that's,
Unconstitutional or in conflict with state law. That is correct.
okay. All right, well, we better hurry up and do that then.
Agreed.
Okay, any questions of the Alderman from the 7th? Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Flowers? No questions. Alderman Boyd?
Yeah, I'm just a little slow this morning. So on page 2,
Yes.
where it's on line 15, where it talks about not exceeding 12 feet in height, nor more than 5 feet from the rear lot line.
Yes. Meaning you cannot set the garage back. You can't build the garage in the middle of your backyard. You still have to build it essentially to the alley.
So you
can give
start
your,
at 5 feet then and
Yes.
move in.
correct.
Okay, all right. I just want to clear it up. Okay, thanks.
And I should add that, if you're in a historic district or anything of that nature, the historic provisions would still apply. This simply has to do with the sort of square footage and the zoning.
But we're gonna have to let it go.
That's all. No further questions.
Alderwoman Davis?
I'm going to give you a statement of clarity. This is not your problem, Alderman. But when we're doing something and changing information, the clarity should be in the board bill. And so the reference to what is the dollar amount, what are the penalty fees, it should have, when we line out old information, we should put the complete new information in the board bill. We shouldn't be passing it any other way. But you say it's coming real quick?
Yes, well, and, yeah, and I guess on page 8, you'll see it references you to chapter 1.12.
It references-
But we should, and I agree, for clarity purposes, it'd be better drafting to include then, outline what those penalties are in this code.
Yeah.
Online, you'd be able to easily click to go to that section, but in a hard copy, you cannot.
I'm good.
Okay. Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you. So I've run into this a few times. Are we somehow limiting the size of the garage still within this build-out? I guess on page 2 it says, I guess the limitation is it has to be 10 feet from the back of the dwelling. So depending on the depth of the lot, the garage could conceivably be quite large if you've got a deep lot, or perhaps.
I am going to defer, I get what you're asking. I mean, can you build a garage that's the same size as your house on the rear of your property, I guess? I'm going to defer to the zoning commissioner on that one.
Thanks.
So that certainly wasn't our intention. What we tried to do with this amendment is we tried to take a form-based code approach to it. We didn't want somebody to build the garage in the middle of their yard. But we also realized that in the small lots, they can't stay under that 30%. So that was the reason for kind of modeling it after the Central West End Code, where they say that your garage has to be so many feet from the alley, which is 5 to 10 feet. And then there has to be a space between the rear facade of the structure and the front facade of the alley. So that's why we have the 10 feet in there, so that at least there is some yard space between the detached garage and the structure.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I kind of wish that we were also setting like a maximum square footage for the garage too, because you could conceivably, the way this is written now, if you've got, this is a bad example, but if the house was much shorter, you could conceivably build a very, very deep garage where you could, park cars in tandem or something. And so I mean, I don't think it'll happen very often.
I mean, I
but
understand your
yeah.
concern. We don't currently have a maximum square footage on a garage. It doesn't mean that we can't. We just currently don't have that. We just have this, can't take up more than 30% of the rear yard.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Alderman Boyd is not present. Alderman Bosley, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time.
Alderman from the 16th.
No questions. The alderman from the 24th stole mine.
Hearing no questions, if there's no discussion, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 5, Committee Substitute.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Flowers? Aye. Alderman Boyd?
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis? Aye. Alderman Kotar?
Aye.
Alderman Ogilvy?
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd? Alderman Bosley?
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg?
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
8 aye votes do pass.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see, now we have Board Bill number,
Number 6. Board Bill 6.
I had it here in front of me a second, Bill. I don't know why I have so much
No, it's
trouble
on
keeping
plan.
track of them.
Somebody's gonna have a house, so it's like this 600 square foot house, you know. build a
We have
garage, it's like-
Board Bill 6 and 7 with Alderwoman Flowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Board Bill number 6 is a rezoning bill dealing with a property in the Second Ward, almost to the very edge, which borders St. Louis County on the way to Illinois. It's right at Riverview and 270. The board bill gives a real elaborate legal description, but basically, what it's doing is, it is a zoned residential, and we're changing it to commercial, but Board Bill 7 will clean up what needs to be done as far as making it residential, commercial, and recreational to go with its use. So Board Bill number 6 is a rezoning. I know this particular property at one time was a golf course, which was, a question was asked last night at one of our neighborhood meetings was, what was it zoned at that time? We believe they possibly got a variance to do that. But this property, I will tell you a little bit about the community. I've been in Alden for 18 years. I've been in politics for almost 22. The people that live in this particular area and in the Second Ward have fought to be very strict on what comes in the Second Ward, particularly this location, because they do cherish and they do want to protect the nature of this particular location. But they have been very successful in defeating at least 4 casino proposals, a truck fueling station, housing in that area that has finally been let out, but apparently didn't go the way we thought it would because we approved one developer and not the next. So they are very proactive in protecting the area and what they want to see there. And this would not be proceeding if I would not have gotten my community's support and consent. So the board bills follow that. Otherwise, as you know, there have been no board bills related to this property since I've been here. So I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the support of my community in this project. The project is Lighthouse St. Louis. It's a huge development, 70 acres. We don't know if it even will happen even after these board bills are put in place. But we do need to put something here to protect what goes here, to protect the people and their wishes, and that there is a tool that myself as alderman and the residents have to be able to dictate what they want to go there and not to go there. We've been meeting for the last couple of years on this project, and so we've finally gotten to this place, and I know Mary Hart is here to, if you have any questions about the zoning on Board Bill 6.
So, just so I understand, 6 is changing the zoning, and then 7 is a
Special use
special use
district.
overlay. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then, we're hearing 6 right now, and we're going from H down, from A to H,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And the immediate prior use was a golf course?
It was a golf course for years, a 9-hole golf course for years, but it hasn't been active probably in, I don't know, 12 years or more. But that was the only use for it before.
Okay. We have a number of speakers that have signed up to speak on this bill. We have, it looks like 3 or 4 or 5. But why don't we go ahead and, this is in anticipation of a development that may happen, is that correct?
Correct. We have no confirmed anchors, businesses. This is basically the boilerplate, the puzzle, so that we can attract folks, or the developer can attract folks so they know where they would be on this property, where they would fit in on this property, what will make sure to prevent any contamination to the river, and those necessary things such as it's not a combined sewer system, it's going to be a separate sanitation and storm system. They've been working to build up this out of the floodplain for the last 8-10 years. There already was an existing levee that was there, and they did build up on that levee since then. Everything has been monitored and proper permits from the Army Corps of Engineers and the city and the planning department and MSD and so forth. So this is really just to see, like, some of the things they've told us. It could be a water park. Yeah, there could be a lighthouse. There could be a hotel. There could be residential apartments for senior citizens. This just kind of gives whoever wants to come there and do development to have a way to figure out where they would be inside this development and what is allowed and what is not allowed. But that'll be addressed more in the SUD district. This is a bill in Board Bill 7. This is just, right now, Board Bill 6 is just changing the zoning. And then Board Bill 7 is a overlay. I do have a special use district in the 2nd Ward in relation to automobile salvage, repair, and auto sales. And it supersedes the zoning laws because I was feeling that a lot of these salvage yards, which I do have, I'm very familiar with JK and what's allowed and not allowed. And it gives us the opportunity to cite and also get permits with conditions and have a little bit more leverage to revoke the occupancy permit if they're in violation of these conditions. So this is really something that I can see should be desired in this particular area because it says what can and cannot go there, and those things that will have conditional use permit hearings for myself and the residents and the Board of Aldermen to be able to protect what goes there and be able to weigh in on that.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. Why don't we go ahead and hear the speakers, and then we can go ahead and open it up to questions. Speaking in favor, we'll alternate pro and con. Speaking in favor is Bill Keeling.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Bill Keeling. I'm an attorney with Thompson Coburn, and I've been working with the landowners on this for the last, a little more than 2 years on this project. I think there's a few things to stress. First of all, what you have in front of you here will not result in this land being raised even 1/4 inch more than it is. The permit to fill the land was granted back in 2007, and the work was completed. And at that time, the hydrological report was done. It indicated that there would be an impact for about 1/4 mile north of 0.15 inch, which is a little more than the size of a capital I on a page. So that discussion occurred back in 2007, and it was done. The owners could, by right now, build a subdivision on this site, and we wouldn't even be here. They have the legal right to do it. The floodplain maps have been adjusted so that it could be developed. But a development like that would not be, frankly, the best use of this land. This land is basically an exit ramp area, an exit area off of I-270, which carries 55,000 cars a day. It would also not be best for, frankly, opening up the recreational opportunities that are in this area. There's over 7,000 acres of green space in this area that are owned by public bodies, some of which have difficulty in making them full use of them. For example, Great Rivers Greenway has had great difficulty with the Chain of Rocks Bridge, which they own, because of security issues at the parking lot in front of it. This development will solve that problem because the owners have agreed that they will allow a bike path to go under I-270 to their site. Bicyclists wishing to use the North Riverfront bike path and to go on to Chain of Rocks Bridge will be able to park safely at this development site and make use of it. That's just one example. But anyway, this is just the first of several bills that you'll see, these first two. As the Alderwoman said, the owners have worked closely with the Alderwoman and with the neighborhood. There's an extensive special use district bill that prohibits all types of uses which the neighborhood doesn't want, and frankly, which the owners don't want to see. If this development can come to fruition, it will actually be a major boon in tax revenue for the city also. This project will need some incentives, but they've agreed not to have any tax abatement. There won't be a TIF. So There'll be a pass-through of all the property taxes, all the earnings taxes, all utilities taxes, will all pass through to the city and to the different taxing districts. So that's, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Why don't we go ahead and hear the other speakers, and then we'll kind of
Thank you all.
invite people back to answer questions if there are any. Speaking against it is Mr., I believe it's Stokes, David Stokes, Great Rivers Habitat Alliance.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is David Stokes. I'm the Executive Director of Great Rivers Habitat Alliance. We're a floodplain conservation organization, been around for about 17, 18 years. And I'm here to rise in staunch opposition to this bill, which is really just the latest mistaken floodplain development proposal for our region, no different than the bad ideas put forth in Chesterfield and Maryland Heights and Lincoln County and so many other places. Our floodplain policy in this region has been terrible for decades. All the academic work on it by Professor Chris at WashU, Professor Belt, the deceased Professor Belt at St. Louis U, Professor Pinter, and many others, and all this is available online, readily available. It says that the floods we're seeing with such frequency in this region, and it's interesting that we're hearing this bill just 2 weeks after recovering from a major flood. All this flooding is man-made. It's over-levying of our rivers, overdevelopment in our floodplain. Climate change is helping to make it a little bit worse, but it's man-made flooding. And the alderwoman said in her comments that, and I'm going to quote her, that she didn't know exactly what was going to happen, meaning who was going to come there if this bill was approved. Well, I know what's going to happen if it's approved. It's going to make flooding worse. They took this land out of the floodplain, and I don't dispute that they got the permit to do it. They took this land out of the floodplain, which means they put someplace else into the floodplain. And that's just the pattern we've had going on in our region for years, and it need not be rewarded. It need not be continued. Somebody needs to stand up and say, stop. And we do this work at Great Rivers Habitat Alliance. We're not just picking on the second ward here. We've been standing up in Maryland Heights and many in Lincoln County and many other places to fight this fight. And it's a hard fight, but you know what? We're seeing more and more flooding. The flooding we're seeing is more and more severe. I was in a helicopter 2 weeks ago flying over the Merrimack River to see with my own eyes how awful that flooding was. I flew right over on the way back the River des Peres to see how close that came to topping over the River des Peres there. Thankfully, it did not for those homes down there. I remember back in 1993 when it did top on River des Peres. And yet we're continuing to make these choices, and it's all under the guise, well, it's good for the Chesterfield Valley, or it's good for the Maryland Heights, or it's good for the second ward. Well, somebody has to start thinking regionally, and somebody has to realize that when you develop your 70 acres, and we somehow allow people to get permits to take things out of the floodplain, which then puts the next city down the line or the next neighborhood nearby into it. But just when you do that, you're not stopping the water. You're just moving it. And I'll say this till I die, over and over and over. You're not stopping the flooding. You're just moving it to somebody else. And our entire region needs to stop allowing this floodplain development because it's doing an immense amount of harm to all the citizens of our region and the citizens of St. Louis City. And having been to the site and I canoed that area with some other people just a few weeks ago, went right past it. I just respectfully request the members of this committee to think long-term, please think regionally. I would say the same thing whether I was before the Maryland Heights City Council, which I have done, and will do many times again, and be the ones to say stop, and be the ones to say we're doing a great deal of harm, let's cease. You don't have to approve these floodplain developments. You don't have to make things worse as we're doing on and on and on. And with that, I usually, when I testify, have prepared writings. I've been traveling a lot the past week, so I wasn't able to do that today. I will try to get something to all of you via email in the next few days. I'm certainly willing to provide any information, any of the studies on this subject from the academics who study it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here Again, David Stokes, Great Rivers Habitat Alliance. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Ms. Stokes, will you be here for just a couple, we have two more speakers, so if we want to, I was going to let everybody speak and then go back and.
Of course, Mr. Chairman, I'd be
That's all
happy to
right.
do,
Thank
happy
you.
to do that. And I guess my comments will be I'll combine comments on both bills into just now, so I don't get up and repeat
Sure.
myself.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And then I believe it's Patty from the Chain of Rocks community, and I'm sorry, I can't. Okay, I'm sorry.
My name is Patty Hofer. I'm currently the secretary of Chain of Rocks Community Association, the main neighborhood group. We love floods. Thank you. And we do accommodate them. North Riverfront Park is flooded. We can't have fishing in the pond in North Riverfront Park anymore because the floodwaters have contaminated the park, so it can't be stocked anymore. And flooding makes Riverview quieter, especially if they block the river off. So we're ready to accommodate the floodwaters. That landfill, it's already there. We can't take it down and make it floodplain again. And North City, North County needs something. We don't have our restaurants that we used to have. Ponticello's, Christo's, Romaines are gone. We don't have any place to go. This is an opportunity for new housing. Most of our land is publicly owned. I think we have one building lot in our community that is available for purchase, and somebody could put a house up with a view of the river. But as far as entertainment, we don't have a winery. We're set up for outdoor activities, canoeing and, water activities, fishing. But we need some kind of higher scale entertainment, nicer places to go for a meal, maybe even a coffee shop, sandwich shop. So we really need this. We don't have anything else. This could be a great spur for other activities in both the city and the county. My colleagues in Spanish Lake and Glasgow Village, Bell Fountain neighbors are also very much in favor of this project. We don't have anything else, guys. We don't get a lot of city services. We don't get street cleaning. We don't get bulk pickup. We're not complaining because really we don't need them. But we'd like to have this project. We need fresh housing, a hotel, maybe meeting space. If the marina ever happens, marinas are expensive. Anything connected with water, it's always 3 times more expensive than traditional building. So I don't know if the marina's ever going to happen. Hopefully the city is putting in an access, and if that works out this summer, we won't need a marina up there because we'll have a better access in North Riverfront Park. So I think that's all I have to say. We really do want this project, and we'd really like your votes. Thank you very much.
Could you tell us a little bit about your association then? Is it homeowners or how many people, how is it just, I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with the geography up there. I don't get up there.
Well, and I appreciate you recognizing that because I go to meetings like this and they've cut my neighborhood right off the city map. So we don't get very much attention. We're that little dogtail just south of 270 on Riverview. One literally has to use a map when distributing literature to determine which houses are in the city and which are in the county. So the Chain of Rocks area there has, there's 32 townhomes on the side of the old Chain of Rocks Fun Fair Amusement Park. They're rental properties. There are about 103, 105 houses in that little area, which is about, I'd say 50 acres. Our lots are ½ acre to 1 acre, single-family housing. One rental that I know of, and, no, 2 rentals, pardon me. all homeowners, we're all old. We don't have the skills, we don't have the energy to bring the nature-centric things we want in. We're looking for younger people to do that for us. But this project is our only option. As I said, we're older. People are celebrating playing with their grandchildren. So we're, a vibrant, established neighborhood with housing built throughout the 20th century. Very nice housing. I mean, people have built-in safes and, just, the building was elaborate because it had started as a summer resort and people eventually wanted to live there year-round. So that's the kind of housing they built, just what they wanted and very specific. They're all different. That's why we have meetings in people's homes, so you get to see everybody's house.
Great, thank you.
Certainly.
Okay, our last speaker, and then we'll go through and ask some questions. Michael Berg from the Sierra Club.
Thank you. My name's Michael Berg with the Missouri Sierra Club, and here representing, we have 905 members in the city of St. Louis. And I'd just like to echo the sentiments of Mr. Stokes. The Sierra Club opposes this project. The Sierra Club opposed the casino projects when they were offered at this location, and we can't keep building on floodplains. We also were opposing the project in Maryland Heights. And we see from the last couple weeks, the flooding happens, and we need to respect our rivers, and especially at this site, which is so very close to the confluence of the two largest rivers in North America. And as far as I know, there's only one place like it in the entire world. Just want to echo that the Sierra Club opposes, this is both on Board Bill 6 and 7, opposes development on this land.
Okay, what I'll do is I think I'll ask a couple questions because I want to make sure I understand it, either yourself or Mr. Stokes, because I want to make sure I understand the opposition. So you're opposed to building on it, but if it's already been filled, if it's already been raised, doesn't that already eliminate the opportunity for that to be a floodplain?
To some extent, but it doesn't mean, again, it has to be rewarded here by this body. I mean, Maryland Heights has built a levee. Doesn't mean I think they should take 1,800 acres of natural floodplain and pave over it. This is 70 acres of land that would have taken water, permeable land, and now it's gonna be concrete and asphalt and shoot it back to the river there. Our region has been making terrible, terrible choices for decades now. And just because Chesterfield gets a levee built when it's farmland doesn't mean they should make the biggest shopping mall out of an area that was completely flooded in 1993. And this is just the next, in my opinion, the next bad choice. And sure, they took it out, they put someplace else in the floodplain. There's probably someplace now, somebody somewhere, like you see in Eureka, people who didn't have flood insurance because they were out of the floodplain, yet Valley Park builds a levee and a landfill, and all of a sudden, people that were not in the floodplain are getting devastating floods. They're not insured. They have no way they can know, and it's just the next repeatable process. And I hope that this committee and this board says no to it.
Forgive me, a little above my pay grade, but isn't the Army Corps of Engineers, I don't think we even have the capacity in the city to evaluate permits, or changes along the levee on the river. Isn't that something regulated by the Corps of Engineers?
Right, but you do have the permit to whether or not to be rezoned to 70 acres of concrete and asphalt to a commercial enterprise. And I would hope you would say no to that.
But
I think, look, nobody wants to say that people of the Second Ward can't have the things they deserve up there. But this land was in proper use as a golf course, as a low-intensity use, and it would be my argument that it be kept it be kept as natural as possible. And yes, even though it's been lifted out of the floodplain, unfortunately lifted out of the floodplain, doesn't mean
But
that it then
I
has to, you
mean,
then have to
that
allow the
wasn't-
next step.
That's not our
I'm not-
decision that lifted that out of the floodplain.
No, no.
That was a decision made at the federal level, was it not, or?
Right, no, I'm not blaming the Board of Aldermen for that choice at all. Right, whoever gave them that permits was the Corps of Engineers of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. No, I've in no way trying to blame anybody at the city for that action.
But now that it's out of the floodplain, it is out of the floodplain, is it not, or?
I've been informed that it's out of the floodplain, so assuming that that is correct, and I don't have evidence that it isn't correct. Having gone right by it, yes, they've certainly raised it. They certainly took land and took a spot, as Michael with the Sierra Club said, they took a spot at one of the North America's beautiful spots where our two greatest rivers meet and where Mother Nature determined water to go, and they got the permit to take it out of the floodplain there. So good for them, but you don't have to reward them for those actions. You don't have to allow this rezoning. And I've been in this, I've heard similar arguments in Chesterfield and Maryland Heights and so many other places. Well, they have the levee, so we have to approve it. Well, we have to approve it. And I would just hope that you don't. You don't have to approve anything. I've seen in Brentwood, they refused to rezone something for an orphanage, so they wouldn't have any orphans in their neighborhood. Yet somehow in this region, we continue to insist that we have to allow rezoning of the floodplain. We can keep out orphanages, but God forbid we prevent a floodplain development. So I would hope that this body would be the first body in the region really to say no to that. And that's what I'm just here asking.
Well, we'll go through the committee and see if there's some other questions here. If you have questions of any of the speakers, please feel free. Alderman Kennedy is not present. Alderman Boyd.
Yes, Mr. Stokes. Okay, so who's responsible for monitoring floodplains across America?
It's generally the Corps of Engineers and FEMA. FEMA's in charge of mapping and emergency services, and the Corps of Engineers generally oversees levees and things such as that.
And when a person buys a home or property, doesn't the insurance company know if it's in a floodplain or not?
Yes and no. Yes, they're supposed to, but the FEMA maps, everybody agrees, including FEMA, who's trying to update their maps now, that the maps are highly outdated. And every time you have a map, you're being told you're in a floodplain, and then if all of a sudden local governments permit floodplain developments up and down the region, not surprisingly, the water goes somewhere else. So if you've seen along the Merrimack River, people who thought they were out of the floodplain suddenly get in it, and people get flooded who don't have insurance, and they don't have insurance because they were told they didn't need it. I've met people along the Merrimack who were 5-6 feet higher than the 500-year level. At least that's what they were informed, and they've been flooded out twice now in the last 2 years.
So we're hearing a board bill that has to do with zoning and being able to basically change the existing zoning. But as it is right now, it's my understanding they can build homes on there right now. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding of the law. I think building homes on it would put lives at jeopardy, and I think that'd be a terrible idea. But yes, you are correct that they could do that now.
So if they can do that right now and build on it if they want to, why shouldn't we allow them to build something else if it's buildable? Because your comment was don't reward them for taking it out of the floodplain. That was your comment. Don't reward them. But you're also saying don't allow them to build anything ever.
And this alderman is, yes, clearly it's a hard decision you have to make. I'm trying to make a regional argument.
It's not really that hard of a decision, because if we don't do this bill, they can ask for permits to build houses, and they can do that. So we wouldn't be able to stop them from doing that. But if the community decides that they want A choice over B choice, why shouldn't we support the community, the people that live there? If they can have this or that, but they chose A, why should we deny them?
Because that choice and maybe not in 27, that choice, going back several years, is going to make flooding worse somewhere else. And again, the city might not have been wasn't the ones who permitted to come out of the landfill in the first place, so no critique of this board there. But that choice to allow that by the federal government or the state, whomever, is going to make flooding worse somewhere else. And in that respect, it's no different from Maryland Heights or Lincoln County or many other places. And I know it's on the board, you're probably I'm trying to make a very regional argument, and I appreciate you're focused on your constituents here, but that's just what I'm trying to do, over and over and over. The floods in our region are getting worse, and every one of these developments in a floodplain presents the same hydrological study that it's not going to affect anything. So we've got all these floodplain developments all throughout the region that haven't affected anything, yet any independent academic study shows that the floods are getting worse and more frequent. So I think the hydrological studies in their individual capacities are wrong.
Mr. Chairman, are you allowing the committee to, per individual?
Yeah, if you like,
Or-
would you like to have someone else?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Who else would you like
Okay,
to ask questions of?
Ms. Patty from the Neighborhood Association. Thank you. I know your neighborhood association is pretty strong, and you guys have been involved in a lot of opportunities over the years. And quite honestly, I've only heard of you guys protesting most things. So I'm excited that you're interested in something because I want you guys to be happy. I know you have an alderwoman that works real hard and definitely listens to what you guys want over there. But you said something that piqued my curiosity. You said the park is contaminated from flooding, and
The pond in North Riverfront Park has floodwaters. Floodwaters are caustic sometimes. You don't know what's in them. So it was when it flooded a couple of years ago, the Conservation Department told us they could no longer stock it because it had been contaminated with the floodwaters. And we've had several floods since there. And the pond has greatly, it was twice its size during the last flood. It's receding now, but it's still way over its banks. So the water in the pond that used to be a nice fishing hole is no longer being stocked.
okay. And another thing that was intriguing is you said originally that neighborhood was built as a summer.
Oh, yeah.
For summer homes.
The history, Alderman Boyd, goes back to French and Spanish land grants. There have always been people living there, but they were hunting lodges, fishing lodges. The golf course started out as I think a boating club in the early 1900s and grew up to North Shore Country Club. And at one time we had St. Louis Yacht Club. We had the Fun Fair Amusement Park. It was a destination. Well, back in the early part of the 20th century, the water company used to landscape the bluffs on the western side of Riverview, and they were fantastic. They have pictures of them where they have these old sponge rock planters that they stand 5 feet high or so, and they all had flowers in them, and this was when the workers were using wooden rakes and mules to cart leaves away. And there was a water fountain, a waterfall. And there are still steps remnant there that some of the old tables, concrete tables with benches are still up in Chain of Rocks Park. So yeah, it's a history as a destination. People used to take the trolley out there and spend the day looking at the 1904 waterworks, which was a really big deal. That was state-of-the-art, and the water company is keeping it state-of-the-art, and they own all of that property. That's why we don't have any place to build or expand. Most of the property is publicly owned. So this little spot, this 70 acres, is our only hope. There's no place else to go.
Thank you for that history.
You're welcome.
No further questions.
Alderwoman Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the testimony from the Sierra Club and Great Rivers Greenway, and I really do appreciate the work and the oversight that you provide on behalf of our community. But sometimes we have to evaluate things at a different level. I'm extremely familiar with the history of the area as well, and as a little girl, my family, that was our outing. I grew up in the Central West End, and we would drive up in that area, and so I'm extremely familiar. It's kind of like our Dirty Dancing in the movie. That's kind of like our place back in the day. That's where it was, and so I'm extremely familiar. But one of the things that we have to also recognize, and I'm going to ask a couple of people to come up very quickly, is that the environment, yes, has changed. And when we look at the rains that we've received the last couple of years, it's totally, totally above anything that our history has had for us beyond 1993. And I believe there was another one in the early 70s, serious flooding. So we really have to know that that is not the norm. But I wanted to ask our planner, Don Rowe, I had a question of him right now.
Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Don Rowe, the Director of Planning and Urban Design for the City of St. Louis.
I wanted to ask you, in this process of evaluation, all the appropriate government entities have given us their recommendations, whether it's pro or con for this, and your department has been a part of all this process along the way?
Certainly. So the process has been a long one,
Okay.
first off. Second is we're a river city, so the river, the Mississippi River, is an asset to our community. It's fundamental
Asset
for our...
and sometimes a challenge. Yes.
Fundamental for our history, it's fundamental for our future, and it's Mother Nature. So this particular property, north of Interstate 270, and I sometimes ask people how many interstates are in the city of St. Louis, and they often forget that Interstate 270 crosses the very northern portion of the city. So this site, this 70-acre site that's made up of really 3 parcels, very large parcels, sits there right on the Mississippi River. It had flooded in 1993. It is zoned A, as Alderman Boyd was reminding ourselves. There's some things by right that they could do. The process with this owner and their seeking of development as partners has been a particularly long one, working with the neighborhood and working with various government agencies, including my own. But part of the sequence I want to just do is that being in the floodplain was a condition that these owners had it. We recognized that. We once, as you recall, as a city, owned 35,000 acres just north of this site, just measured in a small number of miles at the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri. I think it's 35,000 acres, a huge site that the city at one time bought to put an airport potentially there, right at the confluence of those 2 rivers. 20 years ago, we sold that land. We sold it to the Missouri Department of Conservation, so now it's permanently protected as conservation land.
Oh, that's what I wanted to
This site, this 70 acres, is in many ways at the access to that, or the access from the more urbanized area through the interstate and Riverview Drive, is in private ownership. And that private ownership has been working to develop it with a number of series of steps, some of us which haven't directly involved us, and the most important in that, in this realm, and it's a discussion that you've heard mentioned, is the Corps of Engineers issued a 404 permit for them to fill the property. That's in the Corps of Engineers' purview. I'd like to remind ourselves that the Corps of Engineers is responsible for the river from its origins in Minnesota to New Orleans. So that's beyond regional responsibility on the 404. It was issued. It went through the processes of public exposure and review, and that was issued and allowed them to do this filling operation on the site. You can ask them how long they took and the actions that they had to do to complete that filling process from that 404 permit. They did, in working with the Corps of Engineers, I understand, you can ask them more, had to pay a mitigation complete a mitigation about the sensitivity of the site might have been in terms of a wetland by purchasing another wetland in the state of Illinois through the Great Rivers Land Trust. And now that I've used the word Great Rivers, I think we ought to be careful that is a term that applies to a couple organizations, this Land Trust in Illinois, Great Rivers Greenway, and also the Great Rivers Habitat Alliance. So those, we don't want to meld those all together. They have separate and distinct roles. So they did purchase a small portion of land to put in perpetuity as a wetland as part of the 404. But then, yes, what that raising has occurred has now created an elevation, and it is an elevation of elevating this property that once we would see flooding fairly frequently, to be reviewed by FEMA. And FEMA, it was in late 2000, or about a year and a half ago, FEMA, in their review, issued a formal letter taking this, which it had been in the floodplain, out of the 100-year floodplain. And so that's another federal agency that has had an influence in looking at how we're looking at it as a regulatory point for a piece of land that's 70 acres at this location. There are other things I'm sure the developer has been working with in terms of some of the uses they might have there. Of course, MSD is very interested in what water gets to the Mississippi. That's partly in their view. I know there's issues and things that they've been working on with various departments of wildlife, I think, is that. So there is sort of a bouillabaisse of agencies that have been involved. And the two key federal ones in this particular setting the stage is the 404 permit issued by the Corps of Engineers and the FEMA redoing their map and taking it out of the 100-year floodplain. I'll answer any more questions, but one thing I want to tell you is that there are two board bills, Board Bill 6, Board Bill 7. And 6 is a petition from these property owners to change the zoning. And the second one, the special use district, is something that was conscious of our zoning code, doesn't really have some fine tuning to it that we might want for this site. So with some working and conversing with the developers and others, we initiated and have added, so it's an initiation of the city, the second board bill, which is the special use district, that adds some restrictions in our zoning and adds some ways that this property should relate to the river itself in terms of uses. So,
I thank you very much. You actually gave me all the clarity I needed. I heard some of that, but the way you told it, that I think it made it a little bit clearer for me, and I appreciate it. I wanted to make note of a statement you just made, the petition from the homeowners in the area.
no, I'm sorry. I used shorthand.
Okay.
And zoning changes in our American system and in St. Louis can be initiated by the city saying, we want to rezone your parcel for something. Or it can be initiated by, under property rights, the property owners. So the property owners filed a petition to change the zoning with the city. And as a supplement to that, given our zoning code, we've asked to superimpose in Bill 7 something that further modifies our letter zoning.
And the reason I wanted you to clarify that is because for me, I give higher regard if it is the property owners who are involved initially. So that makes a big difference for me.
And, Madam Vice Chairman, as we know you've also heard from other property owners in the neighborhood.
Yes. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the economics of this, because it was mentioned about the flooding in Chesterfield and Fenton and other areas. And when a private person chooses to invest their money somewhere and take the risk, it is not the risk that we impose upon them. It is a choice. And when I look at Chesterfield, some of those folks have been, I think this was the third flood for them, and some are choosing to stay. So again, that's private money being invested, not our money being invested. And if that is a choice that a person makes, giving those opportunities to them and the opportunities to provide services to a community, how you think about that may not necessarily be the responsibility of everyone else, but to those who are most affected. So I'm looking at the property owners who live in that area, and I'm looking at the people who are investing their money. Now, granted, there probably will be a flood, but at the end of the day, everybody knew up front what the risk was, and it wasn't something imposed upon them by the city of St. Louis.
So I'm not sure whether there's a question there or
I don't
a
know
comment,
either.
but I'll make a comment this way. The Chesterfield Valley, important large asset in our region, farmland. Part of the money that went into that to provide the protection of that was government-initiated money to do the levees and whatnot. So that's a context. I may not have that 100% right, but,
Yeah.
But the investment and the risk occurred in other fashions. You're right, this is a property that's been elevated. It's owned by a party. It's seeking developers. They'll have to seek financing. Their financiers will be tire-kicking about what the risk is, and that's what people sign on to when they get to be developers, is to help with that.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm done. Thank you.
Alderman from the 7th?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. If I could, just a brief statement. I have a conflict of, in an abundance of caution, for Board Bill 6 and 7, I do plan on abstaining from voting. My firm has done some work related to this project in this area, and out of an abundance of caution, I do plan on abstaining. That's all. Thank you.
Alderman from the 24th?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Keeling, come back up. Do you know offhand the elevation change here, how much this property was raised in the last several years?
I can get you a copy of the hydrological report. I believe it was basically 10 feet is what it was. It was what was allowed in the permit. Now, the property varied because it's a large property. In some places, it may have been greater or not because they measure from the, I guess, somewhere in New Orleans, whatever, it's like 435 feet is what the permitted amount is. So, thank you. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was approximately 10 feet.
Okay. It's still been flooding though, hasn't it? I mean, was it, it was underwater?
No, actually, it has not.
It wasn't underwater in this last flood?
No, it was not. There is, they have created along the river area what they call a river walk. That part is designed to flood, and it did flood. But the rest of the site was high and dry.
So, okay, so some of the parcel was underwater, not all of it.
It was, and it's designed to do that. Just as Lenore K. Sullivan was underwater, which Great Rivers Greenway spent $36 million to raise the level of.
Right. I guess the challenge for me here, I mean, I don't think the actual zoning bill, I don't think either of these bills are particularly consequential to what happens. But the question is, what is the proposal that we're leading up to? And is it something that can be compatible with the fact that, you know, whether this is a little higher right now or not, it basically is part of a floodplain? And so what do we know? I mean, I frankly don't know that much about what's being proposed here. Can somebody help us with that?
There would be a variety of uses. The site is kind of unique because it's right on Highway 270 and an exit ramp. So it functions in many ways as a Highway 270 exit area. So part of the project will be more highway-oriented use right along I-270, which makes sense. Some of the rest of the project, everything from possibly of condos to other recreational uses, other retail uses, the plan is to have a boardwalk along the river that would parallel this river walk that I mentioned. The boardwalk is designed not to flood. It'll be out of the floodplain. There'll be a series of shops and restaurants along that boardwalk area. It is envisioned that there will be a marina at this location at some point. That's going to take some work on a lot of people's parts, but as you're aware, there is no marina in St. Louis City, or for that matter, in St. Louis County, along the Missouri or the Mississippi. And one of the goals of a lot of people has been to try to make greater use of that recreational resource that the Mississippi River provides. And this is probably the one location where that could be done. As you may be aware, there's no barge traffic at this area because the barges are in the canal on the Illinois side. The current does tend to be slower there because of the chain of rocks there. Now, when it's flooding, yeah, it moves along, but nobody in their right mind is going to be canoeing or kayaking during the flood events that may occur. But anyway, this is, the Army Corps of Engineers thinks this is a good location for a possible marina. A marina there could open up possibilities, again, of this becoming more of a destination as in the past, including for rowing clubs, including for small excursion boats that could take people up to the confluence, that could take people up to see birds in the wintertime. It allows, and then also this will serve as a nexus for the North Riverfront Bike Path, because the owners are willing to allow the bike path to come through their site. They will link it under I-270 to the Chain of Rocks Bridge. They will allow bicyclists to park at this project site to allow them to access the Chain of Rocks Bridge, which solves the problem Great Rivers Greenway has as to the security for parking at that location. It opens up broader opportunities that all this green space up there offers, but which frankly the broader community has not been able to take advantage of. We think that if this comes to fruition, which the use of the river in the way we envision it, which fishing will be allowed there, there'll be steps going down into the river, it will lead to greater knowledge and greater appreciation in the broad community of the water quality issues that Mississippi faces, because there are water quality issues there which frankly don't get much attention, and it may start changing the thinking of St. Louisans from that being just an industrial canal to one that really should be used for broader recreation.
Right. I mean, I guess I'm just, I am a little concerned that developing this site with, you know, a mixed-use property, homes, et cetera, and I don't think we're putting people in grave danger, but there is this sense in that we're setting them up to fail when probably inevitably this site does flood, I would think, in the future, given how things are going. So that, I mean, I can envision a variety of lower intensity uses that would carry less risk with them, but I mean, housing at this site, you know, to me seems just risky. So that's something I would I would be concerned about. And I mean, I'll say, I've had homes in my ward, 24th ward, have recently been destroyed by flooding. This is not a non-trivial issue. So I do think the issues, the concerns people bring up are real concerns that have real impacts on residents' lives.
There's no question that any end user who's going to come to locate at this location and frankly spend money, and their banks or whoever's financing it are going to be asking those questions. And there's going to have to be satisfactory answers for them before anything will come out of the ground.
Did you say this was, the height is now, it's in a 100-year floodplain? Is that?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
That's what the classification is.
Yeah. I mean, that, to me, that just says it will flood. I mean, that's what 100-year floodplain means in 2017. It will flood, and, you know, we'll be around to see it flood. When you have 500-year floodplains flooding twice in 2 years. So, you know, so my sense is that we're not particularly authorizing anything with these two bills, to be quite honest, but we are setting the stage for something. And I hope when we get to the point where there's an actual development plan, I hope some real attention is paid to, you know, not subsidizing something that ultimately is just going to end up underwater every 10 years. So I think I hope we continue to have a robust conversation about that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Alderman Bosley, any questions?
No, sir.
Alderman Oldenburg?
No questions.
Okay. What I'd like is if we could get a series of kind of milestones of how this property was approved, you know, with dates, so that we kind of have an explanation of kind of a chronicle of what's happened. So, you know, if it flooded in '93, what year was the 404 permit issued? You know, the FEMA review, so that I think it would be helpful to get that, and perhaps our planning department could verify that. You know, I just kind of like to have our folks.
That provides some of the actions that they took that was not before us, and we approved that, and we certainly will provide things that have steps before us.
Yeah, I've gotten an email or two about this, so I'd like to at least have some sort of explanation in that. And then, you know, I think I'd like to echo the comments made by the alderman from the 24th. If we come back, you know, right now, as it stands, you know, without any authorization from the city, they could conceivably build single-family homes there, and that requires no authorization from our board. But if they come back down, I would like, you know, that we, you know, before us, and they may not need to come before us, but if they do come before us, I think it's going to be important that we get some, you know, a lot of thought goes into whatever goes in out there, and some explanation as to, you know, where the flooding will happen. Somebody from, I don't know if we could get the Army Corps of Engineers down here to talk about that with us, to kind of share more detail. My only thought in response to the comments made to the alderman from the 24th is, you know, 100-year flood, you know, black swan events happen. You can have two floods, you know, two floods back to back in a 100-year floodplain. You might not have it again for 300 or 400 years.
Develop anything in most of the country.
Unlike our president, I believe in global warming, and I do think, you know, things are changing, and which is concerning. But I know that people buy homes on Sanibel Island and places like that, and, you know, every 5 or 10 years, there's going to be a hurricane, and you know, they make they plan accordingly. And if we have somebody building on this site, I think we need to have a discussion about what their contingency plans are going to be, or how they plan on that might you know, if in the event that happens. I don't think it makes sense for us to be.
It's already in place. The federal government has all that in place.
So, are there any other questions of the committee? If there aren't any, the chair will entertain a motion on Board Bill number 6.
So moved to pass Board Bill 6 out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Madam, no further discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Flowers?
Aye.
Alderman Boyd?
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis?
Aye.
Alderman Kotar?
Abstain.
Alderman Ogilvy?
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd? Alderman Bosley?
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg?
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
7 aye votes, 1 abstain.
Okay. Now we will take up Board Bill number 7, which is the special use for this site. Alderwoman?
Yes, thank you, members, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Board Bill number 7 is the special use district overlay, which will restrict certain uses, which will be prohibited, as well as make it as able to impose conditions on properties or businesses proposed that we can actually have some say here and weigh in on here at the Board of Aldermen as well in the community. I know Don Rowe wanted to speak to this, and then we also have a small, short presentation of the development. And so, Don?
So, yeah, thank you. I thought I did part of this, of laying the land, but there are global issues about our climate and our rivers and water, and places that don't have enough water and places that have too much water. Yes, indeed. And the multiple purposes of water is part. So our zoning, you just worked on the H zoning for this property, which is in our zoning code. During the last 6, 7 years, we've tried to do some things that are supplemental to our zoning code that are called overlays. We've had a series of these on the books for a while, but there's 2 in particular that have come about recently. One is a form-based code, which we've been using in the more urban parts of town because it helps keep that urbanism intact as urbanism. Then there's this special use district, which has been somewhat multi-purpose. So the special use district, like I talked about, the request for zoning is a petition from the owners. The special use district is something that we, the city, engaged in doing that we believe is a supplement that would be benefited to be overlaid on top of this rezoning, if that should occur. And I'll say that it was participatory with the developer. We did a fair degree of elbowing it. The planning staff worked on this. That means Roman Cordell, a young woman that has been with us for about 9 months and has now been lured back to Kansas City, Emily Joy Lucas, which in the planning profession, there's a number of specialties one might have. Emily was very much concerned about environmental issues. And Dan Krasnoff, who has been with us as the Director of Cultural Resources and worked on the form-based code, all took a look at this and said, there's something that we should do to overlay, realizing that zoning runs with the land. It continues. Whether this developer is successful or something else comes about. So you're going to hear about the overlay, and Roman's prepared to get into quite a bit of detail, but we'll be brief. That it has certain things that it prohibits as uses, and it has a certain reverence to the areas of this site that front on the Mississippi River, and then one that abuts the county, and in county is Watkins Creek. So I just wanted to reiterate that that was something that we initiated. I'll make my editorial comment that we do that with limited resources. Our budget is proposed to be cut again this year. And I'll call Roman up to give you some of the lay of the land of what that geography is of the SUD and what it does.
You know, we had previously asked, you know, when we have presentations like this, can we figure out how to get a projector and a computer in here? We got half of my committee over here looking at this site on.
Pretty big.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name again is Roman Cordell. I'm a planner with the city's Planning Urban Design Agency. As you heard, Board Bill number 7 is a companion board bill for Board Bill number 6, which we just heard about, and that would rezone the site from the A single-family dwelling district to the H area commercial district. Board Bill number 7, which we're reviewing now, would propose the establishment of what's called the Lighthouse Area Special Use District, or SUD, which is the acronym that we call it by, for this site, which is approximately 70 acres and is located at the northern tip of the city. For some background information on the SUD, what I'd like to do is pass out some handouts with some maps and photos of the site that are identical to the images that you see on the board. And let me, Donna will pass that out. And for the people that are here, I'd be fine if they had some copies as well. So this first page of the handout that you see in front of you shows an aerial photograph of the site. This is back from 2015. The blue line that you see there is the city limits. As you can see, further to the north and further to the west is unincorporated St. Louis County. The yellow lines indicate parcel boundaries, and as you can see, there are 3 parcels in the site. It was recently re-subdivided. There were formerly 2 parcels. There are now 3. All of those parcels are owned by Discovery Pier Land Holdings, LLC, which is the property owner. And most of the adjacent parcels are either owned by Great Rivers Greenway, the district that was formed a decade or so ago, and the state of Missouri, which owns lots of property, primarily highway-related. The red line that you see there indicates the boundaries of the proposed SUD site. And as you can see, the site is generally bounded on the north by the city limits. There's a small parcel to the north that is not included as part of this development. It's owned by a construction company that owns some property to the north in St. Louis County. It's also bounded by the Mississippi River on the east, Interstate 270 on the south, and Riverview Drive on the west. The site is about 70 acres, and I'll be a little repetitive here. It's a very unique site in the city. It's probably the largest available development site in the city. A size, or a site of that size, is very, very rare, particularly when you take into account the fact that it's vacant land and it's available for development. Not many opportunities like that in the city. In fact, there are no comparable opportunities. It's located on the Mississippi River. As Bill mentioned, there is no commercial barge traffic along this portion of the river. So the water is calmer, makes it more amenable for recreational uses on the water, and the river also serves as a major migratory bird flyway. As we heard, the site was most recently used as a golf course, but was heavily damaged by the floods in 1993 and 95. The owner received a Section 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. The owners added 10 feet of fill to the site, raised it out of the floodplain. As a condition of granting that permit and to mitigate the reduction of wetlands on the site, the owner agreed to create a new wetland site in Godfrey, Illinois. That work is currently underway. Recently, FEMA documented that the site has been removed out of the 100-year floodplain. We got a copy of that letter that was issued by FEMA. And the city's planning commission amended the city's strategic land use plan, a portion of the city's comprehensive plan, in February of 2016 that changed the land use designation for this particular site. So the approval of Board Bill number 7 and number 6, the companion board bill, would establish this SUD, and in essence, it would overlay the proposed H zoning district and supersede its regulations. It would allow the proposed development of what's called Lighthouse St. Louis, which is a multi-phase mixed-use development project that consists of various commercial, residential, and recreational uses. You heard Bill talk a little bit about what some of those uses are, so I won't talk too much about that, except emphasize a little bit that the recreational uses are perhaps the most exciting to the city, and I think perhaps the residents. Some of the uses that have been talked about include a bike path, a river walk, a boardwalk, a lighthouse, marina, and a boat ramp, and it could possibly assist in the extension of the riverfront trail from where it currently terminates at the old Chain of Rocks Bridge and extend it northward to the confluence of the two major rivers. I should also point out that the owner has proposed a number of different types of uses over the past few years. So there's no guarantees, obviously, that any of this will happen. The owner believes that when the whole project is built out, that this ultimately would be a $300 million development project. Since I understand a few of you are relatively new aldermen, excuse me, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the special use district because it's a relatively new regulatory tool. It's a zoning overlay district that provides a little more guidance than the city's individual zoning districts, those being zoning districts A through L, which you typically see more often. A site must be at least 2 acres in size, and the city's planning commission may initiate that SUD in response to well-defined problems. The enabling legislation for SUDs was established back in 2005, and since then a few SUDs have been established throughout the city. The first was the North Broadway Vicinity Commercial Area SUD. This is located in Alderman Flowers' ward and dealt with junkyards and auto body shops, things of that nature. Another one is the Grove Commercial Area SUD, which is in Alderman Rohde's ward in Forest Park Southeast. And so the specific problem that was identified at this site is that allowing certain types of uses that are permitted under the H zoning district could be potentially undesirable and incompatible with other uses and the desired character of the proposed development project. So this would help to eliminate the possibility of certain types of uses that the city and the neighbors in the area may not necessarily would like to see. And earlier this year, in March, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this SUD by a vote of 7-1. And Alderman Boyd obviously is a member of the Planning Commission. In terms of the specifics, the proposed SUD would do 2 things. It would prohibit certain uses and make others conditional uses that would otherwise be allowed in the H commercial district. So examples of uses that would be prohibited under the SUD would be check cashing establishments, pawn shops, utility stations or towers, and open storage. In addition, a handful of uses may be allowed under the Lighthouse Area SUD as conditional uses, and those include movie theaters and cell phone shops. The second important item is that the SUD would reserve 2 corridors, which are called stream setback zones, on the site. The first being a 100-foot wide area along the Mississippi River and a 15-foot wide area along the site's northern edge that would be reserved for recreational uses. The boundaries of the SUD site, as well as the 2 corridors, are shown in Exhibit A, and that's the map that you see on the last page of your board bill. And if you refer to page 4 of your handout, that shows the boundaries of the SUD, as well as those two stream setback zones. Setback zone number 1 is along the Mississippi River, 100-foot wide. Stream setback zone number 2 is 15-foot wide and is at the northern edge of the site. I should point out to you, and I neglected to refer to this, the second page of the handout shows a fairly recent aerial photo that was submitted by the petitioner. Basically, the area that's included is all of the dirt that you see. You can see the Mississippi River in the foreground. Along the shore there, you see some riprap, some vegetation, and then you see a flat, narrow strip. That is the beginnings of the Riverwalk that is proposed. That would be potentially the connection of the riverfront trail extending from the old Chain of Rocks Bridge northward to the confluence of the two rivers. Above that is another slope, and at the top of that would be the proposed boardwalk. I should let you know that with regards to the issue of flooding a couple of weeks or so ago, I took a couple of us drove along the 270 bridge and along Riverview Drive. As Bill mentioned, there was water that was above the Riverwalk area, so that narrow strip of land there that you can see a little west of the shore was in fact underwater, but the top grade of the entire site was above water. Should let you know that also Riverview Drive, which is the road to the west there, the northern portion of that site was underwater. The road was closed. There's a small creek that's located just north of the site, had flooded. There's a pumping station there, and so the road was closed. This was at the crest, basically at during the crest of the flood. But the actual top of that site was not affected by the flood, although the lower portion of the Riverwalk and the adjacent Riverview Drive was in fact underwater. So with that, basically the SUD regulations for Board Bill number 7 state that no buildings could be built in those two corridors that I pointed out to you, along the riverfront, that 100-foot wide strip and the 15-foot wide strip to the north. And then certain recreational uses could be built as conditional uses in the riverfront corridor, those being the trails that I mentioned earlier. As with any rezoning of any property, there is no guarantee that the approval of these two board bills would lead to this kind of a development project, but it would allow these types of uses to be built on the site and would also further restrict certain types of inappropriate uses. And if it is developed appropriately, this development project could become a unique recreational destination. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So just to be clear, there's this site plan here is just theoretical at this point. There is no proposal for any of this. So basically a placeholder at this point.
It was submitted, as Don mentioned, this was the latest conceptual site plan submitted by the petitioner, yes.
Okay. And our approval just is just the approval for the SUD. We're not authorizing, MSD has all of their approvals that they would have to sign off on, and all of that stuff would be separate. So we're not really doing anything other than kind of creating a legal context, a legal zoning context for development to occur here.
Yes, this is basically authorizing the city to initiate a rezoning, more particularly a zoning overlay for this particular site.
So we view them as companion pieces. Both have been approved, meaning Board Bill 6 and Board Bill 7, as companion pieces, both approved by the Planning Commission, one in response to the petition. The second was initiated by us to add these fine-tuning about use and make a particular statement, statement's not the right word, but to make a particular regulation about 100 feet from the river and 15 feet on the north to enhance for perpetuity, meaning this law will run with the land for whoever the developer is for certain protections and access to the river.
Yeah, if, I was saying earlier, if something came before our committee again, I think it's very important that you would have, you know, whether it's Great Rivers Greenway or whoever, you know, the kind of public uses and recreational uses, you know, kind of here representing themselves. If
Right. So yes, sir. Two things. We, as the city agency, are trying to do this overlay as a protection and an opportunity for those things to happen. And the developer is partnering with others to make them happen. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would think the interest of the public of having that land, I don't know if you'd call it deeded, but an easement or whatever there, to perpetuity would be an important component of our approval process.
And in essence, we're doing that by putting this overlay on top.
And I anticipate as much, it's just that we'd like to make sure that all the dots are connected and actually have GRG here or you know, some indication that they're participating in the project. Not at this level, but if they were to come before the committee again. Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Kennedy is not present. Alderman Boyd.
I just have a simple question. Describe for me a riprap. What does it look like?
It's basically, you can see on the photograph is the rocks, basically right at the shore, larger rocks that help to stabilize the shore and prevent erosion from occurring.
Okay. Is that just one option? Are there other examples of ripraps, like ballards or something like that, or is that pretty much it?
Exactly, yeah. I believe there's different types of materials that could be used as riprap, but essentially it's rocks, stones, things of that nature that help to stabilize the shore.
Okay. I just want to know when I see it, I'll feel intelligent when I tell somebody that's a riprap right there, and this is what it does.
And Roman's, speaking as a planner, it's also something that's defined by the Corps of Engineers.
It's their terminology. Thank you, Roman. No further questions.
Isn't that also adopted as a vernacular for low class and stuff like, yeah.
Oh, no, it's riprap.
Oh, okay, well,
This is rip.
This is riprap.
riprap, okay. I
Two
was
different
sitting
things.
there, I thought I learned something new today, I didn't know.
It's not my second.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Learned something new today. Okay, Alderwoman Davis.
I was just looking at a suggested use on this document here, and it's very exciting. It's a shame we're like 20 years behind other areas of the country. Wharf areas have been built up around riverbanks that have been very successful, and I'm just excited for the possibility that it could happen. And one of the other things about an area like this is that you can also bring opportunities to a smaller business owner to provide a service. And so everything does not have to be the multi-million-dollar effect, but we also have space here for smaller things. And I'll give you two examples very quickly, and I'm done. One is in Alexandria, Virginia, the wharf space there. When you come in from the Antique Row and then the homes that are on the back end of that, you have all kinds of little, what do they call those service cart type things where people sell things on the wharf, as well as smaller areas for vendors of food, not always the big restaurants that are there. And so I'm prayerfully, will have some of those opportunities for that. In Xena, Ohio, is right outside of Columbus, Ohio. They took their bike path and created all these opportunities with the railroad cars and other things, and they've got the snowball vendors, they got comic book stores, you name it, all kinds of small business owners that are making a living, but yet it's a fun experience for the people who use those areas. So hopefully this will encompass all of that at some point. Thank you. That's information to the planner.
Okay, Alderman Kotar,
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy.
Thanks. Briefly, with this special use district in effect, like the uses that are prohibited, they're absolutely prohibited, or they can be, you can work around that via the Board of Adjustment?
Good question. They're certainly identified as being prohibited. I'm not sure if there are provisions, and perhaps that would be a question for the zoning administrator, if the SUD would need to be amended, or whether there is a provision to go before the Board of Adjustment to alter that prohibition.
It's having a special, it's prohibited, but you can, by right, apply for a variance. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be granted.
Okay.
But it's just like my special use district, even though it's strict conditions and guidelines, you can apply, but you can very well be denied as well. So it's strictly prohibited, meaning that anyone coming to this area for this location that wants to do a development knows right now, we don't want this.
Yeah.
And so if you decided you want to come in, and as Alderman Boyd said, we don't want any adult theaters, but you want to be persistent, because I remember at one time I had a particular Mr. Flynn that wanted to open something in my ward, and I didn't have any zoning in place, but just the strict standing on my feet, no, it's not going to happen here. He decided to go away. But yes, you have the right to apply. You have the right to try to see if you can still get it, whether an alderman supports you or not, as you know. But it is prohibited, but yeah, you can get a variance, but that is not anything that I would approve.
In ours on the Grove, we do have tattoo parlors prohibited, and there is a tattoo parlor that applied, and, you know, with neighborhood support, ended up getting through.
That was my next question. Given the long association with marinas and tattooing, it seems inappropriate to prohibit tattoo parlors, but that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Bosley, any questions?
No, sir.
Alderman Olenberg.
Yeah, just a few questions regarding implementing special use districts. Yeah, obviously, as aldermen, we want to engage the public, and we get feedback from those residents and citizens that would be most impacted, and we sort of have a public charrette in terms of proposing this. But is there any other mechanism, process that you all look to from the planning agency, maybe a previous study that was done, or is it a matter of just, we had a public charrette within the boundaries? Now here, this was a vacant parcel, but there were some parcels adjacent, it looked like, that could have been impacted. Is there a public hearing, obviously, that just goes through the typical zoning channels? Or I'm just looking for the build-up prior to what needs to take place prior to proposing this.
Okay. Welcome aboard, Alderman.
Well, thank you.
You're looking at the planning department for a 62 square mile city.
Correct. I understand that.
Okay. So it's important about some of these things that we've talked about today have been reviewed by the Planning Commission, which is an authorization of state law about how things work. In this particular SUD, there has been numerous neighborhood meetings over the years about all the uses. There are different ways to approach the zoning. That all sort of ended up being a bouillabaisse into saying the H isn't quite enough, and this is the public hearing that serves for the H input.
Yep.
But that input wasn't in a formal charrette. although we have done those in some things. But also what I did leave out is there was research that we did as we're starting to look at the stream setback zone from academic sources in terms of how to protect the river, about native plants, and that type of research was involved. But it was and is something that initiated by the Planning Commission, which is a body of the city, made up of some folks on the Planning Commission by their position in city government, and then it's a majority citizens board that offers input into that and into actions that we do. And those members come from different disciplines, including engineering and including landscape architecture and that, so.
Understood. I guess my question, well, just to state it another way, at the urging of political leadership as well as community stakeholders and business or residents, if they bring information to you in the way of a framework, this is something the planning agency can help with to craft what is a special use district and a board bill for a particular area?
Yes, I can't deal with 28 at the door at once.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Chairman, can I just say a few things before you close? I'm sad Mr. Stokes left because some of the things he wanted to say I wanted to rebut, but he kept mentioning Chesterfield and Brentwood and Maryland Heights and Lincoln County, and I just want to talk about the city of St. Louis. I've been to a lot of places in your ward. You've invited me, and a lot of great restaurants and venues and things that I only wish we can have in the second ward. And if I want a gourmet coffee, I got to go to McDonald's. If I want to go to Bread Company, I got to go to Central West End. If I want Crazy Bowls, I got to go on Linda and Vanderbilt. If I want to go to a restaurant and sit down, I can go to JC Supper Club right down the way, but they're not even open during the week because the business activity is so slow that they're waiting for this project to come. So that me being on the very border, a lot of my shopping and a lot of things that I do ends up in the county. I go on to Shop and Save, which is just up on 367 and St. Cyr Road, or for me to drive sometimes down South St. Louis to go to PetSmart, it is just not, it's time consuming. And there's a lot of places that we can't go in our community. We had an event there last year called Top of the Trail. It was our first event to try to bring people to that North Riverfront Park. It's the only really connection people have to touch the river and to learn about the river. And the beauty of that was to try to teach kids, particularly in our north side communities that have never had any interaction with the river or with wildlife or with the nature things that's there, to be able to see, feel, touch, smell, and learn about it. We camped out there with the Boy Scouts in North Riverfront Park, and there were a lot of people that came to the Oktoberfest that said they were in the county, were making complaints to the county about why they had to pay a city fee because we had a fair there for spay and neutering. People think this is the county, but it's not. It's a beautiful place in North St. Louis, in St. Louis, period, that I would like to be able to escape without having to drive many, many miles away in my ward, to just go and get some brain rejuvenation, to be able to say if I could get a room off the river to sit and look instead of going down Lumiere, which I like, but I would like to do it in the second ward. So, you know, I have not heard from the Great Rivers Habitat Lands organization about this project, nor did I hear anything about the Sierra Club up until this point. This permit, and I agree with you, Alderman, we will get a milestone for you to how the permit process began and so forth, but we're not rewarding this development with anything. We're just trying to control what is going to go there, have the proper zoning, and for once in 18 years to have some development that we can be proud of in North St. Louis, with no TIFs, with no tax abatement, with nothing but a revenue stream for the city to come. So in that, I ask for your favorable consideration for Board Bill 7.
Okay, I take that as a motion to pass out Board Bill number 7. Is there a sec? There is a second.
Second.
There's a request for previous roll. Hearing no objections, we'll consider that board bill as heard and read.
Thank you.
Just a little thank you. That's the last real order of business, just a little organizational stuff. I was sorry when I scheduled our meeting last week, I didn't realize that we had a conflict with an orientation meeting, so we lost a couple of our members to that. I apologize. We were trying to go ahead and set up the schedule for the, from now until summer break. Alderman from the 19th, and I just will probably trade emails. Alderman from the 24th, I don't know, were you able to get someone, a location in your area, or have you talked to anyone?
Not
yet?
yet. I need to talk to Ms. Davis about the time and date we want to do
Well,
that.
that's what I was going to try to do, is have a little discussion. This would be an evening. I usually try to avoid Monday and Friday, so that would probably be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or... Well, I apologize. We have our sheets here, and that is... my apologies. We have taken action, but let's go ahead and postpone this and provide, yes, ma'am, please. Is it Libby? Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Libby Reuter, and it's not inappropriate that I speak after you've passed on this, because I am an artist who has been documenting the rivers from the Mississippi's headwaters at Lake Itasca, and we're working our way to St. Louis. We've done a number of pieces at St. Louis. I'll share with you this information about an exhibit that we have going on right now at Lake Winona of the work that we did in Upper Mississippi. I am also a member of the Missouri Coalition for the Environment and a board member of the Open Space Council in St. Louis. And while I have listed to speak as a con, I really am encouraged by this kind of development, although it comes on the basis of what I feel is a bad decision to infill this wetlands. But I think it's an opportunity with this much-needed development at the north side to really consider the resources, the amazing natural resources that are available there. Many people don't realize that there is what I call the Mississippi Marathon Trail, 27 miles of biking and hiking trails that encircle downtown St. Louis from the McKinley Bridge to the Chain of Rocks Bridge and over into Illinois, circling what is unique on the Mississippi River of Wild River, 9 to 11 miles, depending on how you measure it, that is free of barge traffic. This is an incredible resource. The Alderwoman spoke about ways cities have developed their riverfront, the way Seattle has incorporated recreational space into an urban environment. And because you all represent the entire city, this is an opportunity to develop an asset for St. Louis, anchored by this development, but including these trails. I just learned several years ago about Mosentine Island, which is an 1,100-acre wild island owned by the state of Illinois in the middle of the river. 10 miles from downtown, from the Arch, we can paddle to the river, to a wild island. Nobody knows about this. It's like our best kept secret. So there are these assets. If we could see this North City development as the anchor of this kind of a Mississippi River marathon. And I also encourage you to think about what the consequences will be from this infill, which is a fait accompli. It's happened. We can't undo it. But it's as if somebody put their thumb on the lawn watering hose. And you know what happens when you do that. Building this, infilling this wetlands is putting a thumb on the Mississippi River, making the water faster and flowing more heavily, and this will only be made more of a problem during flooding when there's that much more water. So what will be the consequence to the proposed marina at the lighthouse of this increased flow of water? What will be the consequences to the marina that's being planned for North Riverfront Park? What about this increased flow on the now closed landfill, construction landfill, that's about a half a mile from the Chain of Rocks Bridge, that's full of asbestos and lead paint? So will that be entering the river? So the positive side is, how do we develop this riverfront trail and make the whole of downtown and North City part of a Portland-like recreational district? And then secondly, how do we consider the environmental impact of this infill and of what it's going to do to the river in a negative sense, driving more pollution up onto the land and perhaps causing more erosion because we've narrowed the river even further, so the water will be moving faster and doing more erosion. So as representatives of the entire city, I ask that you consider not only this as an opportunity for development much needed in North City, but its effect on the larger city, our flooding and water quality issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
And again, I apologize for not having recognized you, as it appears there's a Brandon Harp that signed up, or not here anymore. I think the other speaker spoke on the previous bill, so my apologies again for not providing that opportunity. We had already taken action on the bill, so I presume that we don't have to do anything there again. I was just kind of summing up. I was thinking if we could shoot for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night, and perhaps the three of us could coordinate via email and try to come up with something that fits our calendar. We'll do the best we can, but these would be in the evening. I am meeting with our interim counselor for the board, Mr. Sharkey, here in a little bit, and we hope to have the resolution ready for introduction from the floor on Friday, which means that we may be able to get started on this as early as next week or certainly the week after. To refresh everybody's memory, June 21st, we're having tentatively scheduled, or we will have, I guess, public hearings scheduled for several of the incentive bills that are up. We'd like to try to get this thing put together before then. On the 28th, we're going to have the school board here, and then I confirm CDA will be here on July the 5th with some of their performance measures, hopefully for us to review. So without any further ado, we'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone.